Hey folks, it's Stephan here. Welcome to the Why Play video for the iOS game Pathfinder Adventures, the digital version of the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game. The game is a cooperative card game which simulates playing a traditional pen and paper role-playing game. Your characters evolve with each session played. You use dice for skill checks just like an RPG. The design of the game is brilliant, and I've been a fan for years. I was introduced to Pathfinder Adventure Card Game before it was publicly released. I had started a Pathfinder RPG game playing Rise of the Runelords campaign with some friends, and was following Paizo on Twitter. They tweeted that they were looking for volunteers to demo their new card game at Gen Con. I applied, not really thinking anything would come of it, and was accepted. I'd never been to Gen Con, but they were going to pay for the hotel and my show badge, so it seemed like a great opportunity. I received the demo version of the game a few days before I needed to leave. Because I'm a bit crazy, I decided to ride my motorcycle from my home in New Hampshire to Gen Con in Indianapolis. That was 2 days of very hard riding that I wouldn't undertake again. I was sharing a room with 4 other volunteers, but between the fatigue of the ride and the long hours demoing the game on the show floor, I had no trouble sleeping. I demoed the game over 4 days to, I imagine, hundreds of people. I had a good time and made some new friends. I got to see a good amount of the show floor, but I didn't get to play many games other than PACG. When the game was released, a couple of local friends and I started playing through the entire campaign. Fast forward a few months, and I heard about Tabletop Simulator because Total Biscuits started streaming Co-optional Lounge on Sundays and was using the simulator to play board games. By that time, the second version of the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game had been released, Skull and Shackles, which, as you might guess, has a pirate theme. I decided to scan all the cards and play the game using Tabletop Simulator and to post the edited videos on YouTube. You can still find those videos on my channel, and I'm thankful to all those who've subscribed as a result of watching those videos. I eventually stopped production on Skull and Shackles to switch to the third version of the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, Wrath of the Righteous. That version is brutally difficult, and after a dozen or so episodes I stopped production on that series. I just wasn't enjoying the game, and because of the workflow I had at the time, it was taking me 6+ hours to produce each episode. Between a relationship with my now fiancé and a full-time job, I couldn't keep doing something I wasn't enjoying. But the point of all this backstory is that I have a lot of experience with the game. I knew that an iOS version was in development, but there wasn't much information about it, and every time it came up in the news, it seemed far from complete. It really did take a long time to finally come out, and I'm not surprised. The rule system is quite complex, and the hundreds of cards in the game can override the rules. The most frequent comments I got on my PACG videos were checks that I forgot to make. Anyway, the game is finally out, and I downloaded it to my iPad. The game is free to download, but doesn't include much. Right now, only 2 adventures in the Rise of the Runelords adventure path are available for the game. Meaning, after all this time, it still isn't complete. Whether we'll ever see Skull and Shackles or Wrath of the Righteous is hard to say. I suppose it will depend on how much money they make from this first release. But didn't you just say that the game is free? Yes, but like so many iOS games, it features a slew of in-app purchases for additional content. Now I can understand why they did this. If you saw a game with a $25 purchase price, you'd probably skip it. But a free game, essentially a demo of the full game, that is something people will try out. I would highly recommend the physical game, but we're not here to talk about that, even though I've spent most of the video doing that so far. But I have a good reason for doing so. Outside of the Pathfinder RPG players and the PACG players, I don't know what kind of audience this app is going to find on the extremely crowded iOS marketplace, especially when people get wind of the fact that they will need to spend $25 to get the full game. So to me, the question is, should existing fans be interested in the digital version? Now when you buy the base set of the physical game, it's something like $65 and you get an introductory adventure, the first adventure, and all the cards needed to support both of those. You also get all the base characters and the cards needed to build all their decks. This base set is like 500 cards and 7 characters. There's a supplemental character add-on deck that adds a bunch more, and over the years Paizo has also provided what they call class decks, which feature even more or different versions of the characters. The other 5 adventures that make up the full adventure path, i.e. the full game, are around $15 each, so the cash layout for PACG is not cheap, but Paizo have put a lot of love into this game, and they are clearly serious about it being part of their core business. The iOS game includes only the 3-scenario introductory adventure and 2 playable characters. All of the other adventures that make up the full adventure path are 5 scenarios each. Think of a scenario like an episode of a TV show. If you want the full game, you can invest $25 and get everything that is available today. All the base characters, all the add-on characters, and the 2 adventures. The remaining 4 adventures will be made available when released. Remember, this game isn't even complete yet. That is actually a big savings over the physical card game, and they've added some additional replay elements to the digital game. If you don't want to spend money, you can earn in-game currency by playing through the scenarios over and over. They've added 3 ranks of difficulty, so the higher the difficulty you play, the more you can earn for successfully completing a scenario. The gold is 100, 150, and 200 respectively for the 3 levels. At the time of this review, you can pick up the first adventure, Burnt Offerings, for 750 gold, which is 80% off. Normally the adventures will be 4,000 gold. The other base characters are each 1,300 gold, and the character add-on deck is 10,000. There's no in-game currency way to purchase the bundle they are selling for $25 for the full game. So if you want a different base character, like say one with weapon proficiency, you'll need to play and win the highest difficulty scenario 8 times, and that would only be for one character. It would take 20 wins to purchase an adventure. The game is certainly replayable, but it is designed more as a story that you are playing through. If you fail a scenario, you can play it again, but you probably won't normally do so in the physical game unless you started a new character. I think it is great that they included the in-game currency, but I think the $25 investment makes more sense. But if you already own the physical game, do you want to spend that much to play on iOS? In the physical game, you can play with 4 people, and 6 if you have the character add-on deck. It is, after all, a cooperative card game. You generally want to play them in the group. The digital version lets you do that with pass and play, but I think it was designed with single player in mind. There is a multiplayer button in the app, but it says it isn't available yet, so I don't know if there will be net play or not. To me, the single player and net play modes would be the most desirable. If I'm going to be in a room with other people, I'd rather play a physical game instead of passing around an iPad. Being able to play the game easily with friends in different locations is very appealing to me. I played Rise of the Runelords one scenario every 2 weeks with a couple of friends. It took us 2 years to finish the game. How much easier to set aside 20 to 30 minutes to play a scenario from your home. The digital version of the game is significantly faster to play than the physical version. In part, this is due to the setup required to play a scenario. You have a lot of card searching and shuffling to do to prepare each scenario. In the iOS game, it is immediate. As I've mentioned, the rules are quite complex, and every card in the game can override the rules. There is a lot to keep in mind. The iOS version handles all of that for you, so there is no chance you will miss a check. This is particularly useful for the adventure level and scenario level rule additions, which may only trigger once or twice. The Pathfinder Adventure Card Game resolves all skill checks with dice rolls, much like a traditional pen and paper RPG. Pathfinder Adventures retains this, but using digital dice rolling on your iOS device. The dice rolling requires only a swipe on the screen once you've played the cards to assemble your dice. Digital dice rolling is based on programmatic simulation of randomness. It isn't truly random. The game itself is designed to help mitigate random rolls by allowing you to play additional cards to increase the numbers of dice you are rolling, but it is still completely possible to roll 4d12 and end up with 3 1s and a 2, which is probably going to mean you failed the check. You generally only play cards to increase the numbers of dice on checks you really need to make, so failure can be disastrous. In the physical game, death is permanent. In the iOS game, permadeath is actually off by default, but can be enabled. In my time with the game so far, I've already had 2 deaths. Any death is also likely to mean you cannot complete the current scenario successfully. The nature of a cooperative game is to be more difficult, but that works better for single-session games like Pandemic. You may lose more than you win at that game, but it won't prevent you from playing again. Losing, especially dying in Pathfinder Adventures, will mean you need to replay a scenario or even recreate a character before you can proceed. With so much potentially at stake, leaving your success or failure up to a computer-generated random number can feel unfair. All the artwork which is associated with Pathfinder and the Rise of the Runelords campaign is found in Pathfinder Adventures. Paizo certainly knows how to get the most bang for their buck with their artwork commissions, but it might feel a bit stale to veteran Pathfinder players. There are short cutscenes at key points during scenarios. The character dialogue isn't great, but keeping it short probably makes more sense since it is in no way meaningful to the gameplay. You can skip these cutscenes easily. During the scenario play, the animation is minimal, mostly related to cards and dice. The interface is quite busy because there are a lot of things which need to be represented. In some places they have opted to use symbols in place of text. For players of PACG, a lot of this is familiar enough not to be an issue, but for newer players there may be a learning curve. The gameplay itself is identical to that of the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, but a lot of it is done for you. As the player, you choose where to send your characters, which cards to play on checks you face, and swipe to roll the dice. This will probably be a welcome relief to PACG players who have experience assembling all the cards and dice needed to play a scenario. What exists for Pathfinder Adventures seems well implemented. I have thought I have encountered a couple of bugs in the logic, but I had no way to prove it. It is possible they were misconceptions on my own part. I'm a bit troubled by the fact that the entire Rise of the Runelords adventure path isn't yet complete. The game has been in development for years at this point. As a veteran PACG player and someone who owns the physical game, I'm not currently convinced to spend the $25 on the bundle. If there will be net play so I can play with friends over the internet, that would probably sway me. At this point, I've already played the game. I know the story, and playing with different characters, although challenging, isn't appealing. There are many games coming out all the time. I'd rather spend money on something new. If you haven't played PACG, but you've always been curious or maybe even intimidated by the cost and complexity, Pathfinder Adventures may be a good way for you to experience the game. The bundle is significantly less expensive than the physical game, and the gameplay is exactly the same but requires less setup and memorization of the rules. It is a fun game and is the best implementation of a card game RPG I've ever experienced. Ultimately, the decision needs to be yours, but you can give the game a shot with no more than an investment of time thanks to the minimal but free introductory adventure. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you'd like to see me do a walkthrough of Pathfinder Adventures, please click the fan funding button on the front page or from the little circled I in the upper right of the video. If I receive enough funding to cover the cost of the bundle, I'll create a series for it. Please check out my other videos, including my walkthrough series for Epistory Typing Chronicles and Stardew Valley. And if you enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel and leave some feedback. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.